Before I start my wheat bread, I need to grind my wheat. I do my own grinding. I have this wonderful old-fashioned wheat grinder. You put the wheat in the top, and then flour comes out the bottom. It's really noisy. So, we've ground our wheat, we're ready to start our bread. Hello Advanced FACS. Today we are going to be exploring and learning about baking bread. I have two different recipes that I'm going to introduce to you. This one is going to be whole wheat bread. You are not required to do both recipes. You can choose one. One of the problems with each recipe is it does have an ingredient that's probably not within your regular pantry. So you're going to either have to do without or watch the video. And I hope you can do without because I want you to experience trying to make bread. So we're going to be making whole wheat bread. I use my Bosch mixer. This is what I always use to make bread. If you have a KitchenAid, you might want to half the recipe because the bowl on the KitchenAid is not nearly as big as the bowl on the Bosch mixer. So we're going to start out and we're going to add 4.5 cups of water. Be really careful not to get your water too hot because hot water can kill your yeast. Next, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of yeast. And let me talk to you about that for just a second. I have yeast that is in my freezer. I buy yeast in bulk because I make so much bread. So when I buy my yeast and I need to, I cut this yeast packet open, I put it into my quart jar. This quart jar goes into my freezer and that helps that yeast to last longer. Next, I'm going to add a cup of brown sugar, and I'm going to add this by the half. I'm going to pack it in as good as I can. It should keep shape. That lets me know that I did a really good job packing. Remember, we always want as much sugar as we possibly can get because we all love our sugar. Sugar helps that yeast grow faster, and it's kind of like food for the yeast. The next thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add olive oil. Now, I talked to my mom one time about this, the difference between olive oil and vegetable oil. Olive oil is more of a preservative, and I have noticed that when I make wheat bread, my bread does not mold nearly as quickly as when I make white bread. In my wheat bread, I use the olive oil. In my white bread, I use the vegetable or canola oil. I've never tried my white bread with oil, but I do know that it does mold faster because of the ingredients in it. So we'll let that yeast bloom and then I'll show you what it looks like to go on to the next step. So it's been about 5 minutes and the yeast is what we've called bloomed. What that is the warm water, the sugar, and the yeast have caused that yeast to fluff up. That's called blooming. When that's bloomed, it's nice and ready to move on to the next step. So the next step is we are going to be using what is called a dough enhancer. Now, when Ed's was open, I could purchase dough enhancer at Ed's. Then for a little while, I was able to get it at our Taylor Walmart. It's no longer available at Taylor Walmart. So I've had to actually go onto the internet. Amazon doesn't carry the right kind of dough enhancer. I've had to search it out and look for it. So this is one of those products that is really, really hard to find. When I do find it, I buy 4 or 5 boxes of it and put it into my storage so that I have it. What this is going to do is this is going to give my whole wheat bread a little bit more fluff. All right, so I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of dough enhancer, and then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of salt. Just give that a little mix in. And that'll mix in much better once I add my flour. Now, let me have a little talk about flour and whole wheat. Their hard red wheat will last about 30 years. The problem is that it is so coarse when you grind it that if you were to make 100% whole wheat bread with hard red wheat, it would be very, very dense and very, very almost gritty. Soft white wheat is on the other end of the spectrum. It lasts in storage about 2 years, but you can use soft white wheat 100% and you get that light, fluffy whole wheat bread. I have a hard white, which means that I can use about 3/4 wheat flour and 1/4 white flour. One thing, if you do want to try this wheat bread out, if you want to contact me, I will give you 3 tablespoons of dough enhancer to try it out. I have some extra because I did order some into my storage. So contact me if you want 3 tablespoons of dough enhancer to try out the wheat bread. If you don't, I totally understand. All right, so the next thing that it's supposed to do is we're supposed to add 12 to 14 cups of flour. Now, one of the things on bread, 12 to 14, there's that 2-cup break in there. That's because on bread, flour is not exact. What you're looking for is you're looking for the dough to pull away from the side of the bowl. And I'll show you what that looks like when we get there. I'm gonna start out with 4 cups of white flour, and you will notice that I don't fluff and spoon, and I will level it out, but that's because that flour is so ambiguous in how much we need that it's not that important that it be light and fluffy and spooned in, okay? So I'm gonna add 4 cups of white flour, and then I will add 8 cups of wheat flour, and then if I need to add some more flour, I'll probably do a little bit of white flour to top it off. So here's our 4th cup of white flour. I'm gonna go ahead and mix that in, and then I'll add my wheat flour. So while I add my wheat flour, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna have my Bosch going so that it will continually mix it in, and that way I know if I need to stop adding flour. So I'm gonna turn it on. Take my spatula and wipe the sides, and then we'll see if I need more flour. It's starting to pull away a little bit, but I can tell it needs a little bit more flour. See how it's starting to pull away? Quite that last cut. We'll take that off. You see how it looks dry almost and it's pulled away from the bowl? That's what I'm wanting. It still is a very moist, sticky dough, but it's pulled away from the side, and that tells me I have added enough flour. Now, with whole wheat bread, I have got to awaken the gluten. And the way that I do that is I let this mix on high speed for 8 minutes. And that's gonna start that gluten process going so that I get that nice, tender, soft, fluffy bread. So 8 minutes, we'll catch up. My timer went off. It's been 8 minutes of mixing. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to let this rise. With my Bosch mixer, I'm gonna let it rise until it just barely lifts my lid off. Okay, you can see from my bowl that the lid has started to pop out. So that means it's time to move to our next step, which is putting the bread into the bread pan. So I'm gonna start by spraying my 4 bread pans with Pam so that my loaves don't stick. I'm gonna lightly flour my surface so that the bread dough doesn't stick. And I'm going to put all this bread dough out on the surface. This is going to make 4 loaves of bread. They'll be nice sized loaves of bread. I do still have my mixing blade in here. That'll come out, maybe. There we go, when I pull the bread out. Okay, one of the things that I try really hard to teach you guys, and this is a tough thing to learn, when you're working with the dough, you want to work with it, but you don't want to overwork it. If you overwork it, it becomes tough, and we don't want it tough. You'll see I do a lot of work with my hands, but I'm using mostly the palm of my hands so that it doesn't stick to my hands, okay? I'm gonna take and I'm gonna cut this into as close as I can 4 equal parts. And that's gonna become my 4 loaves of bread. And it might be that as I get this going and I see I've got a really small loaf of bread, I might go back and borrow from somebody else because I do want to make sure that I have 4 equal loaves of bread. Now, I have a nice soft area right here that looks nice. That's where I'm going to try to make the top of my bread. What I'm gonna do, see how I've got folds there? I'm gonna fold those in and I squeeze them together to create a seal. And just see that nice, beautiful edge there? That's what I want. I've got some cracks here that I don't want, so I'm gonna do it one more time. And I'm gonna pinch that and pull that. And it makes this nice, beautiful loaf of bread. I didn't do a lot of working with my dough. I don't wanna do too much. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna set that in and it will rise. So I need to do that for the other 4. Again, I have a nice surface there. So I'm gonna flip it over where I've got lots of folds and I'm gonna roll it, pinch it, and I've got it, okay, we'll work with that in a little bit more. I'm gonna fold it and pinch it again. And now, do you see how I've got that? It didn't stay together when I pinched it, so I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna pinch it again. I want that to stick together so that when it raises and when it cooks, I don't get a great big huge crack in my dough or in my loaf of bread. Nice, beautiful, flat surface there. So I'm gonna pull everything. Got a nice, beautiful surface here. Got a couple of ends that need to be pinched in and sealed together. And I've got a nice, perfect loaf of bread. Now, guys, this is years and years of practice. Yours might not look as pretty. This one's really ugly, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit more work with this one. But that's what it takes, is it takes practice. I can promise you the first time I ever made bread, I did not have beautiful loaves. I did not have nice, fluffy, okay? But over time, I have gotten to the point where I can put these out pretty quickly and pretty quality-wise, okay? So that's gonna go in. Now, I've got a nice clean towel, and I'm gonna take these 4 loaves of bread, and I'm gonna cover them with my nice clean towel that has not been used for anything else. This is going to rise again. I know I'm ready to bake when I can see 4 little lumps underneath this. Right now, they kind of sag a little bit. I know that my pans will be full and that the bread will be risen enough when I can see nice little lumps of dough. My oven will be on at 350. We'll see when it's ready to go into the oven. It's been an hour. It took that long for it to rise today, so my yeast must have been a little slow. You can see the bread is over the top, and so it's ready to go in. My oven is at 350, so I'm gonna go ahead and place those loaves of bread in. It takes 30 minutes for the bread to cook. So we'll see you in 30 minutes. All right, timer just went off. We're ready to take our bread out of the oven. Look at those beautiful brown loaves of bread. Now, one of the things that I've never quite understood, but I do it anyway, is why bread needs to cool on its side. I think if you cool it on the top, that it kind of smashes. So I think that's why you cool it on the side. But we've got 4 beautiful loaves of bread here. We'll let them cool for a few minutes, and then we get to eat. See you in a few. All right, the bread's cooled. I always usually find the one that looks the worst, and that's our loaf of bread. My husband's favorite is the heel, so I'm gonna save that for him, and I'll take that second slice in.
I'll take the third.
Sounds like my videographer wants the third slice of bread. So we'll give that to her. And of course, I used a serrated edge knife. So I'm gonna take some butter, and I'm gonna put that on there, and it's still warm enough that it's melting the butter. This is one of those times when I do way too much butter, but I love it. Nothing's better than melted butter on fresh, hot bread. Tender, light, fluffy. Robin's ready for some too. See if I can get her to jump up here.
It looks so funny.
Bon appetit.